Well, hello everyone, and welcome to today's Engage CX Marketing webinar, sponsored by Lead Forensics. I'm Jerry Brown, Chief Customer Rescue Officer at the Customer Lifeguard, and today's guest editor. I've been given a promotion this week. I'm delighted to be joined today by Paula Medeiros, who's the Senior Digital Marketing Manager at Oracle, Sam Roberts, Demand Generation Consultant at GrowDemand, Amy Kelly, Director, EMEA Marketing at User Testing, and Leah Waite, our sponsor, who is the Group Chief Marketing Officer at Lead Forensics. Today, as you probably saw from the promotion, we're going to be discussing life after third-party cookies and where we go from here. But we're not going to limit the discussion to that, as we have a great group of industry professionals with us today with broad-ranging experience who will share their expertise and perspective on this and other important marketing issues relating to customer engagement. So, hello everyone. How are we all today?
Excellent, thank you.
Good. Lila, perhaps I'd ask you to introduce yourself, as you're the sponsor of this event, and we'd like to hear just a little bit more about you and your background.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm the Group Chief Marketing Officer at the Lead Forensics Group. We have a number of SaaS solutions, entirely B2B. I've been in the industry for almost 22 years now, which sounds really scary when I say it, but entirely tech-based, entirely B2B focused, working both agency side and corporate side, in fact. So I've kind of worked with lots of different brands. So that's me.
That's great. You wear it very well. Amy, good morning. Good afternoon, I guess it is. We just ticked over.
Good afternoon. Yeah, you'll have to apologize. There's a seagull right outside my window. So if you do hear that, I'm not sitting at the beach. Hi, I'm Amy. Yeah, I'm the Director of EMEA Marketing User Testing, the leading human insight platform. In my career, I've worked for large tech companies like Facebook and Google and smaller kind of boutique agencies in London. And yeah, now heading up marketing for user testing in EMEA. We're very fast growing SaaS business, and it's been an exciting couple of years since I started. So yeah, I'm really happy to join the panel today, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah.
Our pleasure, Amy. Thank you. Paula, handing over to you.
Oh, hi everyone. Thanks, Jerry. And I've been working B2B tech marketing for over 10 years, and I've been lots of agencies in the UK, around London, always with big clients, big tech clients. Now for the past couple of years, I'm helping Oracle build their digital strategy and driving demand generation, awareness, creating pipeline, all the good stuff that us marketers talk about all the time, and looking at their audience, how to target them better, how to do a better job every day. And I think that's probably one of our nuances we're going to be discussing in more detail soon enough.
That's a challenge for many marketers. Thank you, Paul. And Sam, finally you.
Yeah, so no seagulls outside my window up here in Manchester, but yeah, my name's Sam. So a little bit about my background. I've got over 8 years experience working with early, mid-stage B2B tech companies. So I previously managed digital presence of acquired CX vendor Ran and Rave. Joined early on that journey, ran through to acquisition, and then led the digital marketing function at a startup called Mirrorweb, helping them take their business from seed investment all the way through to successful Series A funding. And now I run GrowDemand, which is a demand generation agency. So primarily help B2B SaaS companies drive faster growth through marketing's contribution to revenue. Once again, yeah, thanks for inviting me today, everyone, and looking forward to the session.
Well, that's great. Well, we're excited to have you all here. And as I said, you've already heard, we've got a pretty diverse group of people with some really, I think, going to have some really good, robust debate today. We will have some questions, which you will see in the chat panel that we're going to be asking our panelists about. However, we will, as the debate takes its shape, we'll go wherever that takes us. So we want to obviously focus on the third-party cookie issue, but we know that will take us to a lot of different places. But also, just to remind our audience, we will ask if you want to ask us any questions, please do so. We'll do our best to answer those questions during the webinar. But if not, we'll make sure that we respond to those at the end of the event. We will send any answers that we haven't been able to do. So let's go. For the starting point, we were talking about third-party cookies, and there's been a lot of noise about changes in third-party cookies within marketing. And of course, marketing generally with GDPR a few years ago, and now lots of things happening, lots of concerns, of course, about things like third-party cookies. So my first question, and perhaps I'll ask Lila, because you're, based on what you see from a lead forensics perspective, do you foresee the changes that will have any impact in your area of marketing?
Yeah, so I think my response to that's going to be twofold, because where we provide SaaS solutions to marketeers, we actually hear quite a lot about what's the kind of latest subject matters and concerns and challenges on the kind of minds of marketeers at the moment, and we have around 60,000 customers globally, so we kind of get a good sense of what's a challenge. And we've definitely had a lot more noise around this piece of, even just concerns and maybe misinformation around third-party cookies as well. And I think there's a lot of confusion amongst marketeers about what that's going to be, particularly those that operate PPC campaigns, social media campaigns, programmatic and performance kind of anything, in that kind of regard from a digital marketing perspective. And I think the big thing, and then obviously we have our own experience from our own digital marketing perspective as well, because we do use lots of different tactics associated with digital marketing. And I think that so effectively what's happening is that Google are kind of getting ahead of the game. So there's no kind of like legal situation with regard to this third-party cookie piece at the moment. They're sort of jumping, if you like, before they get pushed ahead of the new e-privacy regulation coming out, due to come out in a couple of years. It has actually been pushed back a couple of years already due to lobbying, and so it might well be delayed again. But I think Google are getting ahead of that game. They're actually following in the footsteps of Firefox and Mozilla as well, who have already blocked the third-party cookies. So the piece here is that third-party cookies will be disappearing, but it's actually being replaced with cohorts. So Google are still looking to profile, if you like. So instead of doing individual tracking, they're going to profile and allow advertising based upon groups of behaviors, so anonymized behaviors. So this isn't the end of online advertising as we know it. And of course, for as many challenges that this piece presents in terms of kind of the question around privacy and an individual's preferences and all that sort of thing, it also ensures huge amounts of relevance, and it helps audiences to filter out any noise. And so what we're looking to do is to navigate that. And I do align with this. I do think there is a movement towards I guess more targeted rather than broad brush marketing. We've seen a huge uplift in ABM, and marketers getting really, really serious about ABM, how they can humanize their marketing in a much more targeted way than ever before. And we're really focusing down on ICPs, so ideal customer profiles, much more so, which will help to hone our spend and things. So I wouldn't say that we're worrying, if you like, about this piece, but it's certainly giving us an opportunity to review what we're doing and kind of maximizing our investment, if you like, and kind of just looking at how can we be more human. And I think people are more discerning about that, particularly following the last year that everyone's had. So I think the impact for us is going to be that it's giving us a chance to review what we're doing and how we're doing it, rather than being a huge impact.
Well, I think that's good news, because I think clearly it's an issue that concerns a lot of people, both individuals and organizations. And Paula, perhaps I can ask you the same question, but also from the perspective, Oracle being a very large organization, and just thinking about some of the things that Lila mentioned about relevance, about targeting, about humanizing. You've got many different products, obviously, that could benefit many different organizations. So how do you see it playing out for you and at Oracle?
Yeah, I completely agree with Lila, and I think she contextualized really well with the beginning of the conversation that we need to have. And I completely agree with her in a way that is an opportunity, is nothing to be afraid of, is an evolution of marketing. We marketeers, we cannot be afraid of change. Change is always coming. We're always making better products, better optimization, better everything. And I think this change specifically, it just reflects what our society is living in a way, because we need to meet the rising consumer expectation for privacy. Like, we wanted our privacy when we are targeted, and we understand a bit more of that than the normal consumer out there. And it just gives us more control in a way, in my point of view. And from Oracle perspective, Oracle is huge, too many marketing teams around the globe, international marketing, the mix, languages in the mix. So all that aside, I think we actually been going in a direction which is the right direction, which is this better targeting. Ultimately, that's what it is. We want to do a better targeting. And we're spending millions of dollars in media, in targeting wide audiences, a huge number, volumes, like the funnel has to be huge in order to convert within the 2, 3, 4% we get. So that needs to improve. We can't keep doing that. And I think this is an opportunity that is the first step in that direction. So we don't want to target millions. We want to target, the couple of thousand who are actually interested in buying software products and services. I don't want to target my grandmother. I want to target the right people.
Well, you never know. Your grandmother may be interested, but you're absolutely right. I understand what you're saying.
Of course, that's like very out there, but it just should set the scene, and that's what it is. Is go back to the consumer, go back to privacy, and just one more point to add, which is what we as Oracle for the past few years are doing more and more is. Of course, we use publishers. Of course, we use media and all that good stuff that we all love. But we are, in our plan, in our strategies, more and more to take the consumers to our domain, to our web pages. We had in the past a strategy with loads of landing pages out there. We're not doing landing pages anymore. It's everything the OCOM, the Oracle.com, as we call it. For the past few years, that's been the drive, and more. And that just gives us what we need is our first party data. That's what we need to work on, our first party data. I want to have the conversation, that engagement, one-to-one to the consumer as much as I can, even though it takes our cycle to get to know them better. But even the starting point, it can be better than we have right now. And I think eliminating the third-party cookies that we have now, is a very good step forward.
Well, I would think, I'm just thinking, Amy, about the work that you do at user testing and the human, what you call the human element, and the what you call the human insight platform. I would suspect this is something that's really important for you to be able to understand and, as you say, designing with empathy for your user. So really understanding and being able to do this in a really targeted way must be really important for you.
Yeah, definitely. You hit the nail on the head there, Jerry, the word empathy. And I think it's, this subject matter is interesting because you think of what we've been doing with cookies. Like, what we're doing is we're stalking our prey, right? We honestly, if you think about it, over the years, marketers have become more and more creepy. We've become really creepy. We've become really annoying. And I think that's the thing is you hit the nail on the head as well, Lila, is the fact that it might be an opportunity. Instead of thinking of like, oh my God, we won't be able to stalk every single move that they've ever made and get all of this data on our customer, which, yes, like it might make things more difficult. For example, in a SaaS business like user testing, we would use certain technology to see who would be interested in a platform like ours. We used cognitive intent to understand, okay, if someone's looking for a lot of solutions like ours, we might, try and target those companies. But and that's really helpful. But I think as a marketer, what we've got to do is, at user testing, definitely, I feel like, my 2 years being here now made me think very differently about how I market to people and how I understand my audience. And I think that, as Lana said, it could be an opportunity to actually get to know our customers again. So I think if we could bring back to the art of marketing to understand, okay, who are we marketing to? What are their problems? And what problems are we trying to solve here? And if I don't know about everyone else in the panel, but I've always thought there's something very creative and artistic about marketing, when you really are trying to think of like, okay, how am I actually trying to help people? How could I facilitate some solutions to people through content? And content, I think, has been so important over the last few years, and people have been really trying hard to stand out. And it's a saturated market. We're all competing with other companies to try and get attention. But ultimately, I feel like personally now, after just working user testing, it being so driven by empathy, knowing your customers and not relying on just the big data. Like the big data is important, quantitative insights are very important, but you have to have that real human insight in the sense of speaking to real people, hearing real voices, hearing real pain, and being able to solve that. And I think that, maybe if things are changing and, as you said, Paula, we do adapt as marketers, we find solutions, we crack on. And I think that could be, the beauty of this in a sense. We don't know what's going to happen. We're probably going to find out when it does, and we're just going to have to adapt as we always do. But hopefully the result of this could be the fact that we do become human again. And we think, okay, let's not think about it as numbers and MQLs and all these leads and everything we're trying to do for our sales team and build a pipeline. Let's think of these people as people. It's not B2B, it's B2P. We're trying to sell to people, right? We have to remember that. And I think that's where we have to just think, okay, let's get back to the grains of it and let's think, what's my audience's issue? Why am I here in the first place? How can I help this person? And a lot of the time it's through things like this, creating amazing conversations, getting people engaged, getting people to really enjoy listening to you rather than being badgered at every single website they go with an ad because you're tracking them. Let's get back to the real thing that we tried to do in the very first place, which is just to attract an audience. And demand generation, Sam, as you work in, is, that's actually creating a desire to buy. How can you create a desire to buy if you're constantly just like, hi, I'm here, like, buy my product, and, trying to make it that human element again. And I think it's so important. So if anything comes out of this situation, I think it could be the sense of that we all just become normal marketers again and stop being so annoying.
Well, I think it, that would be welcomed by all of us, irrespective of whether we're consumers or businesses. And as you mentioned, Sam, with GrowDemand, I know one of the things that you like to really think about is how to stand out in the crowded market. And what Amy's saying, if everyone's just yelling, perhaps doing it in a much more controlled, polite way might be a way of doing it. So what do you see in terms of how this is going to affect what you do?
Yeah, no, I love Amy there where you reference the kind of creativity side. Like marketing is definitely this blend of art and science. So I think in terms of foreseeable changes, I see the B2B space very much reshifting with a focus to organic channels and building communities as well. So, something that sits under the brand versus having substantial lean on external channels. If you can create a place of authority and make that your focus, that's going to have such a strong pulling power. You need to create a place where buyers and customers know the only place they can get this level of quality information is from you. And the thing, just to put it simply, it's, you can go two ways with it. You can go educate, or you can go entertain, or, if you can combine two of them, even better. Of course, paid still has its place. This is not to say disregard it. Organic plus paid is still the best mix. But I really think the idea of building communities, focusing on the customer versus this kind of obsession with performance marketing. And I think one point I always make is around, marketers tend to worry about imposing tech changes, but rarely spare the thought that they may have not spoken to a prospective buyer in months. Sometimes it's 3 months, 6 months. Sometimes, it's a year. And it's like, well, if you're not doing that, if you're not having that engagement, how can you possibly deliver context in any of your marketing, whether that's email, ads, LinkedIn social, whatever it may be. So it's gonna very much look like a readjust to tactics and technology do not overrule core fundamentals of good marketing. It's just the enabler, isn't it? Good marketing was happening before third-party cookies. And yeah, I think in terms of differentiation, and I can dive into this perhaps, later in the session, but, strategic narrative, reframing the market, take Drift, for example, taking a story like theirs and reframing it is very powerful because it's hard to compete on just product features today. Going very specific and niching down with a problem. Again, that's another great way of differentiating. And avoid the obvious. So Series A fintechs, most of them will have blue color schemes or websites, stock images, geometric illustrations, jargon filled websites, not to get too sassy about it. But if you look at that, then you go, well, don't do that. Like it's one way of shifting, again, creating that differentiation for yourself.
And one of the things that a lot of you mentioned, and we've heard the term, talking about relevance, and we think about, well, from a number of different perspectives. So, third-party cookies are used to track online behavior. So certainly, we know that's being done now. But how relevant then is what we're thinking about, behavior-based advertising, especially based on what Sam just said, and how do we make sure that what we're doing is really, as Paul mentioned, you've got lots of people you're trying to target, and if we're trying to do this and trying to make this relevant, and we're saying relevance in marketing is a benefit to all. I mean, there's no point, as Paul said, there's no point marketing to her grandmother if she's not going to be in the market for the products and services that we're selling. And so I think certainly as consumers, I know from a consumer perspective, both I feel sometimes that it's the relevance issue is really one that's being missed. So ensuring relevance is really important. So what can you do to ensure that you can continue to be relevant while at the same time making sure you get the message across? So maybe again, Lyle, I'll go back to you and just see what you think about that.
Yeah, sure. So I think that a single behavior can often be a total red herring, can't it? Just because someone has displayed this behavior online doesn't necessarily mean that they're necessarily in the market and they want to kind of see your advert over and over again. As you say, Amy, we don't want to shout at someone just based upon that single behavior. And I think that actually, Paula, you made a really good comment about the funnel, is that as marketeers, we try and chuck as many in the top of the funnel and try and get, 2 or 3% engagement out of the bottom of the funnel and then kind of push people through that funnel. And I think that, when you think about the numbers that you need to get in the top to get anything of substance out of the bottom, it is that numbers game, and it's awful because you do become almost like a statistician in terms of being a marketeer. And when I started my marketing journey, I got told that it's the colouring in department, and I spend more time in spreadsheets now than doing any sort of creative. But I do think that we've shifted so that so people and prospects become numbers. And I think that actually, if we can reimagine that whole piece with marketing and actually start to become maybe a little bit more of the colouring in department that it once was, and have that hybrid. I really liked, Sam, you said it's an absolute blend of the arts and the science. I think we've kind of lost our way in that a little bit, and we are, maybe a little bit numbers heavy. And if we can remember that they're, our prospects are people, I think that will absolutely, set us on the right track. And I think that really, if we can kind of almost reconsider that whole funnel, so that we're not looking to chuck loads of people in the top based upon a single behavior, but we're actually looking at, right, who is our ideal customer? And that is, who's our ideal customer for our business, but also who does our product benefit the most? Who's going to get the maximum benefit out of what we are selling? Because ultimately it's going to help their business, it's going to help them in some way, or if it's a consumer, it's the same kind of principle. But maybe if we actually reimagine that to make sure that we're putting people that we actually can help in the top of the funnel, then we can get them engaged using better targeted marketing that speaks to their challenges and presents a solution to those challenges in a segmented way. So, who are those ICPs? What are they facing in the market? Is that industry led? Is it function led? And then we can hopefully get better conversions, because actually being even more relevant. So rather than getting, I think Paula, you were saying like 2 or 3% at the bottom, what about if we can put very many less in the top, but actually get 50 or 60% engagement? And then over time, we're just continuing that narrative to engage that whole market because we're being so relevant. That's how I think we can continue on the relevance curve in a much more, I guess, a sophisticated way.
And I think you're right, and I think there's a bit of a dichotomy or a bit of a challenge. And Paula, from your perspective, again, if you think about Oracle, and I'm recently familiar with the products, you think about Oracle products and services. You could probably argue that within looking at the business community, you could probably say, well, everyone can benefit from Oracle products. We've got all these great things, everyone can benefit. So relevance here, I guess, is what do? You mentioned some things you weren't going to do, but how do you ensure relevance with such a broad and deep product and service portfolio that you have?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the challenges. One of the things that we as marketers being asked all the time, can you say this? But then you need to say this and target everyone. It's like, it's crazy sometimes what being asked to do, but we keep trying to do our best. And I think I again agree 100% with Lala just said and everyone said before. And I think just to add to what she was just mentioning about the real targeting and really get to know the customers and the audience and do a better job being more creative and speaking a better language, not like the robotic language and the lack of really cool websites and images and branding, etc. I think is back to how we would create real relationships and direct relationships. So that's what this change give us. We need to invest in a direct relationship as a brand with our consumers. And even within the media space, when you're going to have some publishers in between as well, but still the publisher will just allow you to invest in that direct relationship. And that's a bit of what Amy said before, which I really like, is not B2B, it's a B2P piece, right? And that's why you need to just go more and more. And it is really hard because with this like huge numbers, like huge volumes we're working on right now with huge spender at the back of that number, we spend our time just looking at data a lot more than we probably would like. We are, as marketeers, I think most of us are really, really logical. We don't mind spreadsheets. We love numbers, most of us as well. So it's a huge part of it. Like, again, great analogy that Sam said before. But we do need to go back a bit more to the pencil, a bit more to the coloring. And I think that kind of change, that kind of evolution of marketing, which is one of the nuances, I think we're going to have more and more moving forward with technology development. Because it's not just about what Lila said. For me, is important, the behavior and all that, because we're talking about the audience, but also I think a bigger nuance in that piece for me is a privacy preserving piece. That's where we actually start from. And then on top of that, how we learn is, of course, the behavior. So that's how it adds to. But the starting point is really looking at the privacy of all of us as marketeers, as consumer. And that's, I think it's really, really great. We all just have to benefit from it. And ultimately, the companies we work for as well. Because again, my spender will be more targeted, potentially less money, but better conversion, great ROI. And I think back to also what Lila said, there's some research released from Google, and the numbers are great. The conversion, I recall, is 350% higher than what we have in third-party cookies. So I really, really think that's, as in marketing, we have a brighter future, developing more and more technology that will allow us a better targeting, become more human, and all of that.
Maybe we start calling it B2P, business to people.
We should, absolutely.
Amy, clearly what you do from a user testing perspective, really understanding where relevance, how relevance plays in, because this must be something you really focus on to understand with any campaign, any program, to make sure that it does hit, it hits the right people, but not just the right people, but the right message hitting the right people as well. So in terms of relevance, how do you go about making sure that you get the right people with the right message?
So I started a campaign just as we went into lockdown in April. When was that? In April last year.
Years ago.
And I started this campaign where it's just basically weekly webinars, and I would just getting my customers to come on and share some insights. And through that process, I ended up becoming like really close with a lot of my customers, which I guess like when you're on the marketing side, you're a little bit more removed. You're not customer success, you're not in sales, you're not directly meeting them all the time. But what I realized was how incredible powerful that was to develop better relationships with my customers as a marketer, because what I started to do after that was I would actually get in touch with my customers more often and ask, what do you think of this idea? And actually started to just get them involved a bit more. And I think that, when we talk about the different areas of marketing, customer marketing, demand gen, corporate marketing, there's loads of different things. But if you come down to like what's the goal and what you're trying to achieve, and if it is, on the net new side, or if it's just like creating customer champions, I think that a lot of the time your customers have the answers. So that was something that I could not recommend more to marketers, is actually spend more time talking to your customers, having a virtual coffee with them, whatever you want to do, creating a little bit of a focus group, having chats with them, and gaining the understanding of the relevance from them, asking them, what do you love most about the product? What do you think would be better, and all those kind of things, because that's maybe not your remit and you think, God, that's going to take too long for me. But the insights and the actual effect it can have in your campaigns is immeasurable. It's amazing just how much I feel like we started to create more content that was so much more relevant, instead of keeping things quite fluffy and being quite, this is, a topic. Yeah, let's write about it, but we don't know enough. Let's just go straight to their customers and ask, well, what are you doing right now based on this? I'm not doing it. You're the customer. We're helping you do whatever you're doing. But, we work with a lot of UX researchers, and when the pandemic hit and they had firsthand access to customers, their CEOs were knocking on their door and saying, could you tell me what our customers are saying? And they were like, oh my God, when did you come to the UX research department last time? And that shift and change of what they went through, unless we were asking people that, we would never have known. So we started to build up a lot of like content around like your UX researcher could have the answers, excuse me, CEO, but have you ever asked the person that speaks to the customers all the time? And I know that obviously, Jerry, from your work, you would have worked a lot in the service and realized like a lot of the time your customer service people would have the answers. And I think it's about trying to gain the insights, just not from your typical tech and just going onto dashboards and all that kind of stuff. Connected to what I said earlier was, if you're spending that time understanding what is the content your customers that you have already, don't have to do all this extra work to go to net new and ask them what they want, but just ask for an introduction to your existing customers and say, what kind of content would you like to see from us? What kind of activations do you think would matter? How do you feel about the amount of emails you get from us? How do you feel about this? And just asking that. And I think it's completely changed how I market. I'll never go back to the same way I marketed ever before, because of how much that impacted how I feel about the campaigns I create because of my customers.
I think it almost answers the question about, third-party cookies used to track online behavior, and we're saying actually no, we don't need to do that. If we're more intelligent and, as we've all said, more human about this, then and as you point out, Amy, asking people what works for you. Nobody has asked me this. We all get buried in all this kind of stuff, and I think, Sam, from your perspective, I know again, what I said earlier about standing out in the crowded market and the work that you do. I know that a lot of the focus is how to acquire customers faster. How do we do this faster? But we've also got to do it better, as Amy and Paul have mentioned. So, where do you stand on this whole issue of relevance, and how do you help your customers really get down to making sure their messages are relevant to their users?
Yeah, thank you. There's so many points that all of you guys have kind of referenced. It's hard to know which one to kind of jump on and piggyback. But I love the focus here, and is, we can look at click-through rates, we can look at conversions, we can look at the numbers. But as Amy sort of referenced there, it really has to come from the customer. It's like whatever value proposition you're bringing to the customer, whatever that landing page headline is, the value of that piece, it should always come from the customer. The piece that comes afterwards, the measuring of how that performs on the page, the tech side, that comes after. It's not the leading thing that you should go with. And it's interesting, actually. I think, it's almost worth, I think, considering kind of how we got to this place of having this this huge focus on tech changes like this, and how is it going to damage our marketing funnel, et cetera, et cetera. And I think part of the problem is, I think a lot of tech companies have an issue with convincing leadership to do more things that technically can't be measured. So right now, because of technology, we generally have an attribution for everything, don't we? Like, we like to say, oh yeah, well, this was generated from Google organic or organic social, wherever it may, whatever channel it's come from. But actually, if we think about attribution models in their stance, they're actually broken. So I think something that I always suggest to companies is, it's actually much wiser to lean on a manual form of attribution. So asking sales, ask the actual buyer that's come to them, how did you hear about us? Where did you hear about us? Oh, it was the podcast. Oh, it was that discussion you ran on X. It was the fuss that your CEO made on this controversial topic on LinkedIn. Because you can conduct activities and someone can come through on the website, convert, but they may have heard about you through a podcast. It may have been a conversation between two peers. Do you know what I mean? So I think this emphasis of just focusing on numbers, performance marketing, creates this vacuum where leads need to be generated. We need more leads. We need more leads. We need more leads. And here's what drives success. But there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch going on here. And I think what we're going to see with this is it's a positive move with third-party cookies. It's actually, this is a reminder that you probably need to take a step back. And if this is having a big impact on your activities, it's actually probably suggestive that you need to refocus and come back to fundamentals of good marketing.
I think what you and others have been saying all along is that not only is there life after third-party cookies, but there's a really great life after third-party cookies. And it's, as I think we've all said, I mean, I don't think I'm going to restate it, but just to do it anyway, is that the things that you were probably already doing, and perhaps some of the things, I know a lot of the discussions I've had with people about customer experience and customer engagement broadly, especially during the pandemic, has definitely amplified many of the things you've been saying. We've learned, we've gone out, we've got to start asking people. A lot of things I talk about CEOs and managing directors going in, whether it's the contact center, going out on the trucks with their team, whether it's asking colleagues or asking customers, it feels like this is going to become the way of the future, which I think is good news for all of us, whatever side we sit on. And I think that, yes, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just I did forget one thing to say as well, is
sure.
From the B2B marketing perspective, I forgot a very, very critical team that you should talk to a lot is your sales team. Because I definitely think that something as well from the B2B marketing perspective, like if you're talking about relevance and you're talking about what works, your sales team probably know that and they're too busy to tell you. So if you have a really good relationship with them and you're able just to ping them or grab a coffee with them, whatever it is, and just ask, what do you think has actually been working? What feedback have you got, perhaps? And those sort of things, I think that they are really critical for frontline team who will be getting that insight. So B2B marketers are listening to this and thinking, obviously, yes, we know we can go after customers, we can get those intros. Never, ever, I know there can be friction between marketing and sales because it is always like, I need more leads, I need more leads, I need more leads. And you're like, I'm working my ass off to get you leads, but, bear with me. And a lot of the time it's like, okay, let's switch conversation. Let's have a chat about what's working, what's not. And could you share some insights of what the market has been saying to you and how did they even come into that conversation? It says lead campaign on Salesforce, this thing, but I don't understand why that doesn't match up to this. So that was just one last thing I wanted to highlight, was the fact that the sales team relationship is super powerful as well.
Well, it's really important. And of course, everyone knows that nothing happens around here till somebody sells something, right? I mean, but I mean, I say that, and you're right. When I talk about frontline, I mean anyone that's interacting. And of course, the great comment about strategy really falls apart with the first contact with the enemy. I mean, some people think of customers as the enemy, which of course is wrong. But Lila, from your perspective, and think about what Amy just said, and thinking of sort of other tactics, and it sounds like that from especially given what you do when you think about forensics and you think about what forensics means in the traditional sense, looking at every aspect, bringing in everyone that's involved in it. I'm sure that must play very, very nicely into the work that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to come back to this kind of arts and science piece again that Sam that you mentioned, because I'm a really big believer in making sure that you're mapping your I'm going to say it again, ICP, ideal customer profiles, and then creating really compelling benefits led solutions challenge led content. And it might be that you don't get that conversion off that first bit of content, but the idea is that you're looking to add value to your ICP. You're looking to help them. You're looking to nurture that relationship. I think, Amy, you talked about the importance of relationships earlier, and I think you couldn't be more right, whether it's with your customers, but also with your prospects, because they might not be customers now, but in a year's time or 2 years' time, they might be. And so that relationship build goes kind of both ways. I think then it's really important to not just create content and hope it sticks. You've got to look at the engagement. You've got to look at the traction it's driving. You've got to look at the interest levels. And that can be both on individual one-to-one kind of conversations, but also it can be looking at the metrics as well on those pieces, you know. So you can kind of marry the quantitative and the qualitative together. And then when you're monitoring that engagement, of course, there's lots and lots of different tech out there that can help with monitoring the engagement through particularly ABM type campaigns and that sort of thing. Lead forensics can help with monitoring your website traffic via business IP tracking, so nothing to do with individuals. Paula, you were saying about privacy being so important. I think people are significantly more concerned with that now. So if you're tracking at business level to track the engagement, that's going to track your kind of, your holistic kind of stakeholders within that business. And so I think that the best tactics are to employ both or to segment your audiences, first of all, consider their challenges, line up the solutions to those challenges, consider what content, helpful content, not like buy content, but helpful content you can take into that market, and then monitor that engagement through the holistic journey, so end to end. How are your ICPs responding to what you're sending out, and marrying that quantitative and qualitative together. So you're kind of marrying the stats with the conversation. So that's how I think we can become so much more relevant and kind of turn almost like this challenge that we're facing right now into the positive and actually into the ultimate business benefit. Because if you get the right customers through the door, they're not just going to buy immediately, but they're going to retain, and they're going to be customers over the long term. And that's who you want. You don't just want the people who are going to see no benefit from your product and disappear. You want the ones who are ultimately going to be able to benefit from whatever it is that your product does, and you want to go on a kind of a lifetime journey with them because they're seeing huge value, and then obviously as your organization you benefit from the lifetime value of that.
Well, I think that's a very good point. And again, Paula, thinking of Oracle and the products and services you have, and you think about in the ERP market specifically, you've got a product and solution there that really, the organizations trust you to effectively run their whole business. And what Lila was saying, they're not going to just buy that this week and then go and get something else next week. They are dependent on you to do that. So thinking about what we've been talking about, things like the input from salespeople. Again, you've got a very large sales team out there. How are you using these different strategies to make sure that, again, from a relevance perspective, you're getting that message through, and that you're thinking about, as I know you are, the lifetime value of what you can deliver?
Yeah. So I completely hear what Amy said before about the engagement with the sales team, and how I like to address is the alignment. And that's one of the things I keep repeating, because the alignment, there's always can be better. We do have some level of alignment, but again, is larger organizations are harder and harder, more specialized sales teams. So then when they require that you need to target my specific product, my ERP solution, that's what you need to talk about. Like, well, I can't. I have 100 other products, and you get all this back and forth how to do better marketing, and they have an opinion about it, and but we still need to work together. We need to collaborate ultimately, and it's through conversation. And it's one thing that I do a lot, because the type of marketing I do, the digital marketing, I am very top level. So we do have the ABMs teams focuses on more strategic accounts. We do have more field teams focused on a specific country level. And I'm at literally top level. I'm going like volume talks. That's what we're trying to do, my team. And that's the hardest one, but also the very important one, because it kind of needs to connect with everything else. So it's interesting, but I love it. But we have so many teams, and then what we need to do, and what we do in our list is just collaboration. We need to keep talking to the sales teams. We need to keep talking to field marketing teams. We need to talk to MarTech, push for better MarTech, because ultimately we are really dependable of the type of marketing we can do. Like Oracle talks, we have so many legacy in-house that we need, and we know as fast as a startup or a new cloud-based business that we also are, but there are so many different connections in our database and our ultimately marketing data. We have the best products in-house. We have amazing CX products, but even for us to use as a big company, it's really, really challenging. And I think we just need to continues this collaboration, continues the talk, continuous improvement. And I think that's the beauty of marketing as well. There's always room for improvement. It's like we have in our minds, okay, this will be the perfect scenario. I never had a perfect scenario, and I can probably bet that none of you guys also had a perfect scenario to create and execute the perfect marketing plan. And we've been talking here like throughout the past hour almost, all the different things we think about in when we put in together a marketing plan, and there's so many details. And I think it just goes back to, okay, so out of the hundreds of details we can discuss and go through, like, let's pick the top 10 and go through that. So which are the top 10 that really can be effective, and get a nice mix of those, and then keep checking the results, keeping optimize what we're creating, going back to the customer, going back to the sales teams, going back to auto marketing results, benchmarks we have, and that's the best we can do. But I think ultimately what we are aiming is a better precision, more precision, better user experience, and data protection now as well, because this is a huge thing for us. We know that people hate being bombarded by ads. How many ad blockers apps we have out there, and you probably have some in our mobiles as well, because they are annoying. But we wanted to do better. We don't want to be annoying. We want to be helpful. And I think that's the flipping coin. We wanted to be helpful. We want to actually find the people who want or needs our products and services. I don't want to talk to people who don't want. There's no gain in any way. I wanted to find that win-win relationship. I want to find that right person who really benefits using my products and services, and ultimately making this world a better world for all of us. And that's what I believe as a marketeer, and that's what I keep pushing for.
Well, we need more of you out there, Paula. There's no question about that. Sam, from a demand generation perspective, because I know that's a big focus of what you're doing. What options do you see, given what we've been talking about? Getting the right people, using other people, collaboration, all of those things. What other things are you seeing in terms of driving demand, but making sure that you can still retain a good return on investment? And you're muted.
Sam, you need to unmute your mic.
There you go.
Oh, sorry.
You're back again.
There we go. There we go. Yeah, I think in terms of kind of what Paula mentioned there, there's always more to do in marketing, isn't there? Sometimes the lying in bed after a day at work, the brain's still going. But yeah, I think in terms of the piece you mentioned around relevance, if we were to take targeting even aside, consider something like LinkedIn organic activities. Like when you're pushing information out or content out through LinkedIn, that's not technically targeted. You're just publishing that out into the network of LinkedIn. But so long as what you're pushing into that network is serving a narrow slice of that market, your buyer, very well, then you're going to reach them. And you have to consider what's the way that your buyers want to consume content right now. What's the format? And, really, if we think about, again, the last year, it's where are they scrolling? We all do that, whether it's before bed or at lunchtime or whatever. So I think being active in those channels is very, very important. And also looking at the buyer journey and really saying, well, the buyer now has so much power to consume information, get what they want. There's information's everywhere. Everyone's serving it to them. So I think you really have to say, let buyers move through the journey in a way that suits them, and perhaps shift out of this funnel piece where it's like we've obviously considered the funnel for a long time, and I know HubSpot and various vendors have shifted their ways of thinking into more flywheel. But if you were to ask someone how many people here have been put through an automation sequence and then purchased a solution, it's probably actually very few. And it's because it's much more complex than that, especially in like bigger organizations. There's so many people to engage before a solution is purchased, conversations that need to be had, procurement, whoever it may be. And I think what I would advise is thinking about short-term activities that deliver pipeline and also long-term. So you can almost split a team with demand generation in mind and say, to make sure that we hit pipeline, we're going to have this team here and we're going to obviously have the KPIs. But you also want to make sure you've got this long-term approach where you are thinking about brand and thinking about building audience and becoming that authority in that and basically building credibility in that space. And I think if you do that well, again, you'll be able to keep the business happy and delivering on the revenue number, but also securing your future by not just focusing on short-term kind of wins. So yeah, and I think as I referenced before, educating buyers or entertaining them, I think it's taking that approach, especially with your content, that's really going to create that audience that you're looking for.
We're coming close to the end of our time together. It's been very, very fast, and I hope everyone agrees that we've had some tremendous ideas shared. As I said earlier, we've got very different people from very different places, and I think it's blended together very well. What I'd like to do is just to give you all a chance to sort of have a final 2 minutes say on sort of where things are going. But I want to sort of backdrop it with a couple of other, not so much questions and maybe statements. We think that we wonder whether anyone, we've been talking about how people, you mentioned creepy as an example, but do you think B2B people mind their business interests being monitored online? And also, given what we've gone through in the last 12, 15 months, social media, how important is that going to be going forward? So perhaps I'd like to ask you this final question, and you could frame your answers around some of those things. And really it's just what would your top tip be? What are you going to say? You've given us lots of great information already, but what's your top tip or takeaway for consideration as other marketers thinking about all the things we've spoken about, not just third-party cookies, but the changes that are coming? What advice would you give people? So Lila, maybe I'll just start with you, and if you could just give us your best 2 minutes, that would be fabulous.
Yeah, for sure. So I think in terms of social media, just touch on that one first of all, is we leverage that for brand. We don't use it for demand gen. It's for brand only. And you can get some demand, but largely people don't want to be sold to whilst they're, scrolling, in their lunch break or whatever. So we use it for brand building activities. So I think, Sam, I think you are absolutely right that everybody is on social media now, that you've got to influence your audiences. But what we do is we have a 3-pillar approach. So if you only focus on demand gen, you're going to fall short. If you only focus on brand, you're going to fall short. So we focus on 3 core pillars: demand gen, brand, and advocacy. So customer advocacy. And like everything that we do within our marketing tactics and strategy, we're like, right, which of these pillars does it line up to? Because they're all equally important. In terms of my top tip, I'm going to say my ICP again. It's like my acronym of the day is map those ICPs. know their challenges, tailor your communications according to a value add. Think about nurturing those relationships, roll out the red carpet, and consider your conversions as well. So when you get an ICP opportunity, make sure it converts. I think there's a stat that 27% of B2B inbound inquiries are converted beyond the initial stage. That's a shocking stat. Like, if that can be 80%, then you're going to get much greater value and much greater return on your marketing investment. So monitor those conversions. It's really, really important. And monitor engagement through the pipeline. So at every single touch point, you're monitoring the engagement and the interest in all of your content, whether that be on your website, whether that be on a landing page, whether that be through media or third parties, but monitor the engagement with your value add content. So very much merging the art and the science together.
Great way of putting it. Amy, your best tip for us, best takeaway.
Related to the social media aspect, Jerry, I think that it kind of comes back to why social media started, and it was to be social. And I think that we're not being social. I think that we're being very like showy offy and kind of be like, whose content's the best, and let's just post my content constantly. So I'm talking from like how I feel as a consumer of content, and I feel like we could do more in terms of connecting. And I think it was related to what you said, Sam, about building communities. And I think that that's probably the powerful part there. So, you know, like on that side of social media, yeah, I think it's just like going back to what it's supposed to be more social and be less kind of self-centered with your content. And then I guess my sort of main biggest kind of takeaway and what to say today is just reiterating a lot of what I said already, is just go back to learn your customers again, you know, because we've all changed in the last year or so. We're not actually the same as we were. We all behave quite differently now. We're very, very in our laptops, and you've got to just think differently about how you are marketing to your personas now that we've all changed as people, and we all expect things differently of brands. So the empathy part of it, what you talked about earlier, Jerry, was really critical. You know, how empathetic are you being? And remember that actually displaying empathy for your customers is not easy. You have to work hard at it, and you have to think about how much I am speaking directly to my audience and understanding them fully. So yeah, I think that's my main takeaway from what I can bring to the table, is just saying that my different approach since I've been working at user testing of being more customer centric and speaking more to customers on a weekly basis has helped me actually create better campaigns and content that is more relevant. So I think it's, you know, there's probably a lot of digital marketers and people that are worried about this change of third-party cookies. My biggest advice would be like, don't panic. It's not going to change the world. You know, you're still going to be able to do your job, and you'll still be able to adapt. So if there's any issues around, obviously, retargeting, I know there's been a couple of questions come through. I don't have all the answers for you right now because I don't think anybody knows exactly what will happen, but the good thing is just we will be able to adapt, and you'll find out when it happens, which is probably still, as like I said, 2 years from now. So, you know, we've got time, guys. Don't worry.
Yeah, don't panic, Corporal Pike. Paula, final word from you.
Yeah, I will try to be a bit more tactical here, because I know there's some questions about I'm still not fully understanding what the change is. But again, like Amy said, like, don't panic, you have time. But to really understand that, go back to your plan. Just check in your plan where you have third-party cookies right now in your digital plan. When you identify those, talk to your publisher or your ad platform or whoever is like, is across the board. So it'll be social media, or will be programmatic, whatever it is that you have third-party cookies, that eventually go away. So start thinking now how to replace those moving forward. What is the shifts in your strategy that you're going to have to do? And you figure out eventually that you're going to have a better targeting out of those changes. You might have less numbers, but that's a good thing, as we've been talking now. And that would be my advice to people who are still concerned and not really understanding what it is. It's not a big thing, but it will change in the long term. And more changes, like I envisage a lot more changes in the same direction. Cookies is just one of them. Look how many details we have in a digital campaign, like how many technical details like that will affect our data. And we were talking before, and data is like when you you can slice and dice the data in so many ways that we're always trying to find, the prettier slice to show off, and it keep being the same way. But if anything, this prettier slice will get, I think, clearer and clearer without so many slices and dices. I envisage the marketing will actually just get more and more transparent. We have more clarity on what exactly the data.
Yeah.
Say.
Well, I think that's a good word and a good image to leave us with, transparency. And Sam, just a final word from you before we close for the day.
Yeah, I think really my final takeaway would be to just reaffirm that simple playbook. It's focus on your ability to own your channels. And, if you were to say, well, how do I do that? Very simply, it's find out who's telling the most interesting stories in your market, and then bring that to your buyers and do it in a way that they like to consume and the channels that they like to enjoy. And then kind of echoing the social media side of things, it's, go have conversations with your buyers. It's amazing through something like LinkedIn, the kind of relationships that you can build just by commenting on people's posts. That's something that was just impossible not so long ago. And it can be done in such a non-evasive manner, or you can deliver value with one comment to a potential buyer like never before, whereas an email outreach can sometimes be completely out of context. So I think if you focus on those things, you'll win.
Back to personalization, back to human, many of the things we've heard today. And I wanted to thank you all. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope our audiences have. We've heard so many different views. I think it's really helped. I know that one of the questions about confusion about third-party cookies, but I think we've pretty much said, look, as I said, don't panic. We'll be okay. It'll be all right on the night. So thank you all again. It's really been great hearing from you. The webinar recording will be shared. So if you want to re-listen, or if you have colleagues that want to listen to this, the link will be sent to you to the email that you registered with. And I want to thank, again, just before we log off, I want to thank Lotta Lead Forensics for sponsoring today's webinar. It was great. Thank you all, 4 of you, for sharing all that information. I think we all learned a whole lot more. Very engaging, and I hope we all enjoyed it. So thank you once again, and let's be careful out there.